Okay. All right. So you're in the right place. We're talking about fair maps. It happens to be very relevant at this moment in history. And I just want to give a huge shout out to everyone. I wouldn't be surprised if we have a smaller group tonight because people are burnt out. We've been engaging in a lot of activity, and it's been a huge pleasure for me, and I hope a lot of people have been having a good time, but it is intense because this is the time that we're in right now where a lot is happening at once. And I just want to say congratulations on behalf of John Lewis, because you are making democracy an act. And so really great work. And to celebrate, we have this super fun picture that either Jay or Sarah took at Mappy Hour in Hudson last week. So.
Oh, good. That's cute.
Yeah.
Start them young, I say.
Yeah, they're indoctrinated already. So if we fail on this, they're going to have to pick it up from here.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to have our normal layout of the meeting tonight. We're going to get updates. I'm really excited about our guest speaker tonight, Ben Carter, who's going to talk about how to talk about fair maps with people, what to emphasize, what not to talk about, what kinds of words to use. So hopefully that'll be really helpful to us as fair maps is in the news more. And hopefully it makes a lot of sense for us to talk to more and more people about it. We'll hear from Carlene and we'll give actions. So we're at the very end of all sorts of things right now in the timeline. So feedback to the PMC district maps, the deadline is at midnight tonight. So we'll go through at the end of the call. If anybody hasn't been able to do that and still wants to do that, I'll walk you through how to do that. The legislative mapping portal deadline for submitting there is October 15th. And so we're working on transferring some of the community of interest maps to that portal. We'll talk about that later too. And then 3 lawsuits have been filed, and there's actually been quite a bit of action in the last couple of weeks on that. And so Carlene will update us on that tonight. And of course, this happened a while ago, but we never want to forget that the fair maps legislation that we really, really want is just sitting in committee, unlike other things that have passed in 0 time at all. So we don't want to forget about those guys. And so we'll keep on talking about that as well. So now we'll just jump, because Anne just came in just on time. We'll jump in to team updates.
Whew, I gotta catch my breath. Sorry, I lost track of time. So the legislative team, it has the same goals, and Janelle, you just mentioned the one about the fair maps legislation. We're still working to get our legislators to listen to us. And if you go to the next slide, we have sort of a plan, or we have momentum. So we did participate in Fair Maps Lobby Day, and those are the numbers generally around the state. There were 221 people at Lobby Day. There were 115 meetings. There were 51 no-shows, which included all 4 of our legislators in our area, or 4, 6, 8. None of them in our area showed up, but we are working on continuing to try to get them to schedule meetings with us. So it was a fairly successful lobby day across the state, but because our legislators didn't meet with us, Bob Moline has continued to try to schedule them. And fortunately, we do have 3 meetings scheduled with the assembly people in the 30th district, 10th Senate district. And we're working on the others as well. Our Senator Rob Staffsholt has not yet agreed to a meeting with us, but we're looking forward to actually being able to talk, probably with staffers, but perhaps at some point we'll actually get to talk with the legislator. So what was really wonderful about this lobby day was that teams were created, and the team that I was on really gelled. We were organized, we worked together, we learned how to work together. And we're prepared now to meet with our legislator and hear what the legislator has to say. And I'm hoping that around the state, similar teams will be available to be rapid response teams. That might be something that the Fair Maps Wisconsin group tries to do, so that as issues arrive, teams are ready to respond and reach out to legislators. And I think that's my report.
Thank you. Anything to add, Bob, for the Senate District 10 specifically?
I think Ann covered it very well. And as she said, I'm still working on a meeting with Rob Staffel.
Awesome. And Terry, you were organizing Senate District 31. How did that go?
Yeah, I think kind of echo what Ann said. I thought it really went well. We had about 7 or 8 folks. And of course, we met with Jody Emerson, very supportive. We ended up meeting with Steve Smith, Senator Smith, who actually is writing it. And so that went really well. It's kind of like preaching to the choir. Unfortunately, Pruczynski and Petrick did not show. And one question to Carlene, I wanted to make sure, because I know, Janelle, you had seen that recording of that. I wanted to make sure, Carlene, that you did get you should have got the link to that recorded 20-minute meeting. So if you could.
We got a lot of them, and Amanda's actually taking care of that part, so I can check and make sure. But
No, that's fine. I just wanted to follow up, and you should have gotten that. So in general, and I wanted to commend Carlene. I went to the couple hours training in the morning. I was just really impressed how smoothly it went. And then our meetings in the afternoon. So, hats off to you and your group, because I've been involved with some of these in the past, and not so much via Zoom. And so it was really, really well done. The other comment I was going to make, and actually I'm going to send the copy of the letter I sent in this morning, Janelle and Carlene, I'll send it on to you as well. The folks in my group wanted to get a copy of that. And again, just expressing my frustration with, the lack of representatives who want to talk with us on the subject. So that'll be interesting to see how that goes. The last thing I was going to mention, and this is to you, Carlene, maybe, I get the Up North news, and I thought I saw something about, there was some blurb about the People's Map Commission not going far enough to represent minorities. I don't know. Have you seen that yet, or was there something?
I'll give an update later.
Okay.
I'll cover that.
Okay, that's what I got. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Terry. Nice group. All right, now I'll pass it to Carlene for the legal update.
So, as Janelle mentioned earlier, there are 3 lawsuits, and in the last 2 days, a lot has happened. The first 2 here are highlighted because they went to federal court, and then they were combined in the federal courts to be one case. It's a 3-judge panel that has been appointed. It's a pretty favorable panel. And the federal courts, just to lead off, the federal courts are a better place for these kinds of things to be heard, because people are there on lifetime appointments. They're not elected, they're not beholden, and they tend to be less partisan and less ideological. Did I say that right? So the first 2 cases, the Hunter versus Bosselman, was brought by National Democrats, and that was combined with the case that was brought by Law Forward, representing BLOC, which is Black Leaders Organizing for Communities, Voces de la Frontera, and the League of Women Voters, and then some individual plaintiffs that are now in districts that are overpopulated and very likely to be cut up in weird ways. And just to say from the start, all of these are based on districts being malapportioned after the census. All districts are malapportioned and therefore unconstitutional after the census, because that's the first federal count that for congressional districts. And because constitutionally they have to be all the same number of people, they are going to be not malapportioned and unconstitutional. The first two suits were brought to say, start over. Don't use the maps you have now, because the maps you have now are gerrymandered, and even if you just change them a little bit, they're still going to be really bad. The third suit, brought by Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, was brought in the state Supreme Court, and it is about having the state Supreme Court, number one, be the court of original jurisdiction. Now, this is different than the rule. The rule would be like now and forever, they would be the court of original jurisdiction. And that was the thing that we submitted comment and stuff about last November. This is a motion asking the state Supreme Court to take the case and be the court of original jurisdiction. So those three things were brought, and you want to go to the next slide? 2 weeks ago, the Wisconsin Republican leadership filed in the U.S. Supreme Court and asked that the U.S. Supreme Court rule and dismiss the two cases that are in federal court. There's been no ruling on that. I've listened a lot to commentators who talk about what's going on before the Supreme Court. This is not something they're mentioning at all. So I don't know what that means. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an expert on the courts, but I just keep listening for them to say something about this, and they haven't. The Wisconsin Supreme Court did grant the motion to be the court of original jurisdiction in Wisconsin that was asked for by the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. And the 3-judge panel, this is 2 weeks ago, indicated that they felt like maps should be in place by March 1st, and they set aside time for a trial in January should the parties being the legislature and the governor not be able to agree. Next slide. Then yesterday, that same federal court said, okay, we're going to issue a temporary stay on this. Last night when we had the team leaders meeting, we didn't have any information on this. Today, this afternoon, there is a little more information on it. This is paused, but they did commit to having, going forward with it if the governor and the legislature can't agree. So this is going to continue to play itself out. The article is linked there, and I know Janelle always sends these, so that's something to keep an eye on. But right now, temporary stay, in my understanding, means that the federal courts have stepped back from this and said, okay, the parties are trying to solve this, and we're just going to step back from it and see how things play out. So next slide. The next thing is that today, Kevin St. John, lawyer for the Republican leadership, was before the state Supreme Court, and he told them that the legislature plans to vote on new voting districts in their November session. So November session is currently scheduled for November 2nd to the 11th. And that means that, according to him, now when you read the article, there's a lot of other kind of disclaimers in there. Maybe more time for this or that or the other thing, but according to him now, they are planning to vote in November, which means, and I'll talk about this later, that there will need to be hearings before that. So that's something else that we'll want to everybody will, put that in the back of your head. Either the last week in October or the first week in November, there are likely to be hearings, and we're going to want to rally around that and really get people to Madison as much as possible to testify at those hearings. We should have a 48-hour notice, but probably not any more than that. So that's what we know now. Those suits are moving forward at varying paces. The Supreme Court and the Wisconsin Supreme Court and the federal courts aren't going to do any kind of rulings while maps are still being drawn. So this is all just sort of posturing for what will be the eventual litigation.
Thank you. We'll have to like add 5 minutes for the legal update every month, I think, because this is just going to get more and more complicated.
Yeah. Yes.
By March, the meeting will be 2 hours long, so just prepare yourselves now. Thank you, Carlene. Really well explained. Sarah couldn't make it tonight, so I'm going to fill in for her a little bit on the MAPI hours. Big, huge thanks to everyone who showed up in Eau Claire and Hudson. We did not have a fantastic turnout, but we did have a lot of fun. We have a couple games to help explain the criteria that go with the maps, and you can win prizes. And I think total about 27 people provided comments to the People's Map Commission draft maps. And that's what has a deadline of midnight tonight that you can still do today if you'd like. So because of that deadline being tonight, the next 3 MAPI hours that we have are really going to be educational MAPI hours. We're still going to show the draft maps. We're going to ask people what kind of questions they can think about, how they can like approach a map to think about if that's a good map for them or not, because we're going to be seeing lots of maps in the next 6 months. So we feel like this is a really good muscle to start exercising. And then we'll have all the games that we had before. And we can also offer to transfer people's community of interest maps. So it's a great opportunity to come and learn and meet new people that want to work on fair maps moving forward. So think about which one you'd like to come to and invite your friends. Don's not here, I don't think. And the slides maybe not updated. So I'll just say let's see, whoops. Dave's not here either. So I'll give a quick update on what Don Leake's team's been doing. He's recruited folks. I'll just go to the next slide because that one's not up to date. He's recruited a few people across the state to help him analyze all the maps. So Dave Fedrovsky did a information request from the legislators portal, and we were able to get all of the files that had been sent to the legislative portal, and we've been able to analyze all of those and then analyze the People's Map Commission maps and kind of compare everything. So it's been very educational for us in the group, but we haven't put anything externally facing yet about that. So we're just educating ourselves, and if or when the time comes for us to make statements maybe about the legislators' maps or anything like that, we'll be ready to do that. So that's what that team has been doing. And I'll pass it over to Jay.
Okay, writing team has been very busy. Very proud of everyone. We have an example here of Irene's letter to the editor that made it into the leader. I can't remember which district municipality that publication is in, but we are seeing articles in lots of papers, and I would just like to say, if you see one in a paper, please take a photo and send it to me or anyone that you know is on the writing team, because we want to collect those and have them for our trophy case. For content for our upcoming articles, first we're going to, of course, talk about the letter that we just submitted today was talking about last chance to submit maps. Of course, it's just about over, but maybe we'll have a few. Then we're going to report on what happened at the lobby day and the aftermath of that. Hopefully we get some more people to come back and actually agree to meet with us. And the following submission will be about when we have the People's Map Commission maps and the legislative maps, and we can compare them. So we'll see some differences, I'm assuming. Another big thing that's going on with the writing team is we're fundraising some like small dollar donations to buy ads in social media and the newspapers that we're publishing to, for getting the word out more about fair maps. So we have a donate button on our on the website of Pierce County Grow, front page, and I will post the link to that in the chat right now. And any amount that you could spare would be awesome for that.
Thank you, Jay.
Here's the link in the chat. Yep.
Thank you. Maureen, do you want to give an update on Burma shave signs?
We've written several, and I know that there's one up in front of Patrice Veit's house on County Road FF in Pierce County. There's another set over on Highway 29 in the Brathels. And I don't know if others have been put up. We're always looking for another place to put them because people get sick of seeing the same signs for more than a couple weeks. So actually it's time to change the ones that I put up. Maybe I'll switch them with the Brathels. Do you know if Ed put up any other ones?
We're waiting to hear a spot on Highway 25, I think. That's in Dunn County. And there's another opportunity to put one near this set that's on the photo here, but we're kind of waiting to see if there's more high visibility places. So if anyone knows of anyone in the country that has like high visibility spot, that would be optimal. We have a few extra sets still.
Yeah, it'd be good if we could get them up because it's, it's sort of a project to get them written and then to get them painted. So it would be nice to see them up. So if you can think of any places to put them, that would be great.
Can I ask a question about those? I wonder if you want to make the last one be call Senator Steph Schultz, or tell Senator Steph Schultz or something, so that there's a call to action that goes along with it in your fifth sign that gives people who are driving along something to do, so that if you have them in various places around your region, there's one more thing and it's an action.
You can see that under the first and under the last, there's the end gerrymandering thing, the little sign there, the purple sign for end gerrymandering. And that is a great call to action. We could do that, but we just thought this was easier to do, to just put the end gerrymander, so then they can look that up if they're interested. But giving them
a lot of people don't know that it has something to do with their legislator. It's just that one more piece, but it's not essential.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a thought. I love the
Yeah,
I love those.
it's a good idea.
They're absolutely great.
They're written on both sides, like let's say on the rigged maps, that's wrong, Wisconsin, or fair maps, Wisconsin strong. Then on the other side, I think it says in voting districts fairly drawn, democracy keeps shining on. So whichever way you're coming from, you're going to read a different jingle.
Yeah. So especially anyone in like Barron, Buffalo, Polk, Dunn, we might have a spot, but it'd be fun to get them like as far around as we possibly can.
Also working at making 20-second videos of them, and that may be to put on social media, and that may be the better place to put the the call to action for legislator contacts. Actually, when you're driving 55 miles an hour plus down this road sign, I'm not sure. I'm
Yeah,
not sure you need a fifth sign. I'm not sure you should stop and call your legislator.
Yeah.
Carolyn, did you have a question?
Yeah, I do. How much space do you need for the 4 signs? What's the distance requirement? That would help if
These-
we're looking for a place.
Yeah, these signs are fairly close together. We've the ones that we've been doing for years, usually for a presidential campaign we do 20 paces between. So 40 some feet between the signs, but it looks like these are more compressed. And I've passed them on the road, and because I know what they say, I can read them easily. I don't know about others. Mike, did you go by them and have any thoughts about their spacing?
Yeah, they're probably a little closer. We thought we were working with less real estate here than maybe we were. We thought we were limited pretty much to from that mailbox to, you can sort of see where the brush begins, but we might actually, subsequently learned that there may actually be more frontage on this place that this particular person owns that we could have used. So he wasn't home when we did this. So we made an assumption of what space we had. So it could be, they could be a little farther apart, and we'll try to do that in future postings.
Awesome. Looks like our guest speaker is here, so I might close out the conversation about the Burma shave signs real quick, and we can come back to it in after our guest speaker. Or actually, if there's any more questions about the Burma shave signs, contact Maureen or Ed or Michael. And if you don't know any of those people, contact me and I'll put you in touch. So Ben, welcome. Glad to have you here. Thanks a lot for coming.
Absolutely. How are you guys doing tonight? Excellent.
Very well,
Excellent.
thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. So I don't know, Janelle, if you want me to just jump in right away or maybe provide some context. How do you want to do it?
Yeah, I'll just, yes, we would like you to jump in right away. I'll just share real quick a little, so we kind of I wanted to put it just a little context around having you here. So, we're all trying to spread the word about fair maps. This is a photo of Cesar Chavez saying, how do you organize? And you say, first you talk to one person, then you talk to another, then you talk to another. And that's really what our job is right now, is just to talk to more people and more people and more people. And so I'm really pumped about having Ben Carter here tonight. He's from the New Heights Communication, where he's a director, has a great background. And I haven't heard from Ben Carter yet, but I have heard from the New Heights Communication firm, and I've thoroughly benefited from the tremendous insights that we've received. And so I wanted to make sure that everyone in our group who's writing letters to the editor and bringing more people to the cause have an opportunity to hear these really helpful insights. So with that, Ben, it's just a pleasure to have you here, and yeah, help us learn.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I'm certainly touched by that introduction. Very nice. I didn't expect to see a slide with a picture of me. So, so I'm gonna quickly share my screen and then navigate to a couple of slides that we have here. As Janelle, let me get this into full view. Okay, excellent. Can you guys all see this? Excellent. All right. So essentially quickly, so I, as Janelle mentioned, work for New Heights Communications, progressive woman-owned communications agency based out of Washington, D.C. We work on a lot of different issues, all across the progressive policy spectrum. And one of them that we've been working on, obviously, is redistricting. So the work that we're doing is tied to fair representation and redistricting, essentially to try to help a number of different state tables or groupings of organizations, put together resources and information such that they can move their individual state level conversations around redistricting. So we're going to quickly hit today districting and our goals, key messages, base messaging, fairness, resources, villains, stakes, do's and don'ts, and then we'll leave it open for discussion. So quickly, communications goals. These are the quote unquote squad goals. And what better squad is there than the Avengers? Inspire and motivate people to engage in the districting process. Obviously, that's what you guys are doing in terms of trying to connect with folks and help them understand that they can actually influence this process. We want to focus the conversation around resources and equity, and you'll find out why a little bit later. And then demand state leaders draw fair and equitable maps. And that's kind of the top line levels of what we will be going through. So the key messages that I actually see that, Janelle, you guys have on your website. So that was pretty cool to see that it kind of converted very easily. If you guys have seen their website, then you know this is kind of the frame that we've been using. No matter our color, background, or zip code, most of us believe that voters pick our leaders. Our leaders should not pick their voters, which is, you know, kind of standard operation in terms of democracy. A handful of politicians in states across the country work to break the process, drawing districts to serve their political interests instead of communities. I think you guys have like that exact language there, except you insert Wisconsin there. We must mobilize participation and pressure state lawmakers to draw fair districts, pass federal legislation ensuring every voter in every community has an equal voice and resources, and establish clear record of community demands and desires such that we can challenge any attempts to rig the process in court. So a quick bit, our people and our key messages. Fairness inspires more than representation. And where some of this comes from, I'll tell you in a minute. You also want to talk about resources and outcomes. So a loss of resources for schools, healthcare facilities, roads, and public infrastructure. There was some information from a study that fair representation did to pull out the things that moved people and did not when it comes to, you know, inspiring them around this issue. And rather than some of the things that we hear a lot of times in the news about redistricting, rather, a lot of it what really actually moves people is talk about fairness and representation. So moving on from that, the base is inspired by voting. They're more inspired by economic and racial justice. So these are things that, you know, when you think about fairness, you know, kind of that base level of fairness that we've all kind of come to understand when you think about things like the civil rights movement, things like that. You know, those are the base things that people, you know, have really deep views about, really deep feelings about. So don't be afraid to invoke race when it comes up. And then equity comes from resources. And by resources, obviously, we mean how much money a school gets for computers that they need. And if redistricting is done in a funny way, you might not have the adequate resources that you need at that school. Same thing for roads, same thing for healthcare facilities. So that's kind of what that refers to. Also, you have to make sure you hit the key message. One of the most interesting things, this little meme on the side talks about, you know, the difference between 10 years in terms of cell phones. So you know, cell phones 10 years ago looked like this, and then 10 years later, they look like this, making the point that a lot can happen in 10 years. Another example that we often use is like a kid can be a kid and then 10 years later, you know, be of full voting age. So it matters that we have fair districts within the time frame of 10 years because it can really impact, you know, how people can make their voice heard. So we got to keep the urgency up and then make sure people that know that, you know, 10 years is a long time for this to have implications. And then defining the villains and their villainy. Obviously, everyone knows Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. Yes. Essentially, these are a couple statements in terms of how we frame the conversation around what politicians are doing. So for example, the first one, politicians try to divide us, drawing districts to silence our voices based on what we look like, where we come from, or how much money we have. And you notice in these, they're not partisan at all, because I think there's another slide that comes up, but we kind of avoid partisanship at all costs. Another one, a handful of politicians are drawing district lines to divide us so they can choose which voters to heed and which to ignore. Use cutting verbs like slash to trigger anger that activates. So as I mentioned before, partisan messages in the study that I mentioned earlier tended to actually evoke backlash, even with people who saw themselves as either Democrat or Republican. So like, even if you said to a Republican something that was supportive of Republicans, it's still kind of, you know, it was kind of a taken aback because, you know, we all kind of understand what fairness means in the American context. And that it's because it contradicts the principles of equity and inclusion. When it comes to democracy and equity, it needs to be fair for everyone. So that includes Democrats, Republicans, and everyone in between. So a broader narrative, whether we're digging a neighborhood out of the snow, cooking up a Sunday block party, or planting a neighborhood garden, nobody knows our communities better than the people who live in them. But for far too long, a handful of politicians have divided us into districts serving their political interests instead of our community needs. They want to take community districting out of our hands so they can pick and choose who counts, tearing our neighborhoods apart for the next 10 years. By joining together to speak out for fair districting, we can make our communities whole and deliver what our schools and families need for the next decade to come. So if you kind of look at how that's structured, it's kind of like this is our community, we're together, you know, we know what our community looks like, but these politicians, and, you know, politician is a loaded word in most cases for most people. It means a lot of different things. But in this case, we're saying politicians are doing what politicians always do. They're carving us up. They're doing things that they know they shouldn't be doing, all for their specific interest. And so that's the kind of frame or perspective that you want to kind of utilize when you're, you know, kind of coming up with language, talking to people, but also when you're actually drafting stuff for like maybe Facebook and things like that. So really quick review. So these are some of the things you want to do. Connect the new maps that are coming to accurate representation and resources for your community. So it's not only representation, it's also about like how resources are distributed. And that's kind of, I mean, I don't know if you guys have talked about that. It's kind of like a abstract idea of how resources get distributed. But we've kind of come across a couple of examples when essentially if a community that is typically seen as one is split down the middle, their resources are also split. So it doesn't have the compounding effect. So, you know, maybe their schools, their healthcare facilities aren't at the level that they should be because they're being split apart. So also define community and communities of interest in plain terms that make sense. So I actually had one of our table members from New Mexico, I think, mention that communities of interest was a little bit too nebulous of a term for them. So we just said, hey, just say who the people you're referring to are, like whether it's you know, Latin American people, Black people, whoever it might be, just use clear language that everyday people understand. Obviously create urgency, be positive and inspirational, stand together and let people know that there's power in your numbers. And as I mentioned before, avoid partisanship. That doesn't really help in terms of the messaging from the study that I mentioned earlier. Always try to simplify as much as possible. And this is an interesting one. I think everyone understands and has seen when you see stories about redistricting, typically, especially in national news, it always just says like, this is good for Democrats or bad for Democrats. This is for Republicans, and this is, you know, good for Republicans. And what our work is actually centered around is trying to inject some of the conversation about resources into the conversation. So journalists include that in their stories. So it's not just about like who in the political spectrum is this going to help or hurt. It's about actual community level people who are being impacted. So, you know, that's the thing that we need to be focused on, not whether or not, you know, such and such is going to get reelected as a result of this redraw of the district. So that's it. So any questions that you guys have for me, I'd be happy to answer. There's some general stuff. I think, Janelle, you also have some materials that we shared with you ahead of time, which, you know, people are happy to, are free to use as needed. You know, and we're happy to be a resource in any way you can think of it.
That was super informative, Ben, and I love your illustrations. Thank you. And yeah, any questions?
I just want to point out something that Ben, and some exact language that Ben used, because I'm also part of this group that Janelle is talking about. I used the one about whether we're digging ourselves out of the snow and that kind of stuff last winter in a post with the meme with Mr. Rogers. It was shared, organically shared, more than any other post of all the ones that I did. You know, I mean, so we have this amplifier network that sends things out, but people really resonated with Mr. Rogers and with that post, and there was commentary around digging people out of the snow and things like that. So it was really, I can attest to the fact that people find these things to be something that they can relate to.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. So what I'll do is
Question.
I'll PDF. Somebody asked if we can have the slides. I'll PDF them and send them through to Janelle.
Thank you. And I think Bob has a question.
Yeah, I have a question. The general question, and I have a specific example that if you or anybody has feedback on, I'll want. But the general question is, how much to avoid being negative? And I don't mean being mudslinging at someone else, but just a more negative message. And I'll illustrate with a specific example we came up with in our social media team earlier this week. So the tagline, which is a little bit negative, but still feels effective to us. And so again, I'm asking for feedback. The tagline of "None of that matters until you end gerrymandering." So the lead up is, what do you care about? Hunting rights, healthcare, women's reproductive freedom, clean water, broadband internet access? None of that matters until you end gerrymandering. So we liked it, but we recognize that there is a negative element on that. And I want feedback.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's any problem with testing things one way or the other. These are obviously suggestions. If you have an instance where you use that language and it got shared, or you got, the kind of attention you need, by all means, there's no rhyme or rules in terms of communicating what hits, in certain manners, in certain ways. You can't always plan for. So I'm completely in support of testing things and just making sure you have an understanding of okay, this has this bend, this has this bend. But these are just kind of broad suggestions that you can kind of utilize and take advantage of.
I like the way I like your response. Our team is big on experimenting and trying because we don't know what's going to resonate with the community.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the elements that Ben mentioned that I love is kind of being inspirational and reminding people that together they can get something done. So I feel like if you had the message that you mentioned, Bob, and then ended it with we can fix this, let's get together and change this so our communities win, or something like that, or I don't know what the wording would be, but so that
I can picture it.
So that the last sentence isn't just well, none of this matters until gerrymandering's fixed, and then I feel like I'm well, then what?
Yeah, Janelle, perfect response. But just adding, but together we can change it. It makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
Good point.
Okay.
Any other questions before we go? No.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you guys listening to what I had to say here, and Janelle's connection back to us. So if there's anything else that you guys are interested in learning or getting a deeper dive into, please let us know.
Thank you so much, Ben. Really fantastic having you here. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Have a good night, guys.
Take care.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. Yeah, I thought I just eat that stuff up. I feel like this is our path to communication power. So I hope
Do we have any specific examples of how gerrymandering affects resources in Wisconsin? Is Jeff Smith or someone available to say, oh yeah, if it weren't for gerrymandering, we could.
We do. We have the Joint Finance Committee hearings where the governor's budget was one of the things being considered, and at the same time, and the more than 50% of the people who testified were testifying in favor of accepting the governor's budget, especially as it referred to public schools, and it was rejected. And we've got public schools who are just struggling all over the state. So it's that lack of collaboration that is halting things. So yeah, resources are not coming to places that they need to be because of the lack of cooperation, which is comes right back to gerrymandered maps.
Yeah, I think we could point at Badger Care expansion in that same one. That's resources our communities need and aren't getting, even though 70% of Wisconsinites want it. Funding for roads is another big one, especially where in rural places. I don't know. I know it's something that my neighbors talk about a lot.
Broadband. Yeah. Just lots of different infrastructure projects that would be really helpful in rural communities as well as urban communities. The legislature is fond of penalizing Milwaukee and Madison because they're very blue and not giving resources that are needed for certain kinds of projects. It's the list is long of those kinds of things.
Great.
Good, thank you.
Well,
another one. Let me just mention this really quickly. Is the lack of local control when it comes to things like environmental impacts, when it comes to water quality and things like frac sand mining and such as that. Trempealeau County just had the rug ripped right out from under them.
Yeah.
I would like to add something to that. Is I think another resource that's been affected negatively by the gerrymandering is equal access to the voting process for persons with disabilities, which I cited when I made my presentation in the lobby session. I think that's important too to consider.
Thank you for lifting that up, Pat. That's very, very true. Just gerrymandering is already a form of disenfranchisement, and gerrymandered is used to disenfranchise even more. So yeah, very true. Well, that's a nice segue back into our team updates, which we just had one last slide. So Jay, I'll pass it back to you. Oops, did I share my wrong screen again?
That was the right slide, I think.
Oh, is it the right one? Okay, sorry. Yeah, so update on video social media.
Okay, well, so as you guys are hearing, Bob has been busy on Twitter and Sophia has been busy posting on our Facebook and Instagram. Right now, I roughly calculate about 90% of our posts are just something to do with fair maps. So we're really hammering that message currently. Oh, of course, this is the fair maps meeting. I attended a seminar at a States Voices conference last week and got some good information for campaign planning materials. So I'll be putting that to use with our social media tactics and strategies. And we're going big right now, getting the word out about Mappy Hours. And we've already got some photos coming in from the ones we've already had. And we'll be using that to let everyone know that there's real people in the community doing this and foster some more participation. For something that you could do, along with donating to our campaign for fundraising to get the word out, is to follow us on Facebook or Instagram if you do Instagram, but definitely Facebook. The more followers we have, the more reach we have to reach other people in the local community about our messages for fair maps. So I will put the link to our Facebook group in the chat, because that's something you could easily do.
Awesome. And if you want to put Twitter in there too, Elbridge Project, that's awesome.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Bob, would you be able to throw your Twitter link in there too?
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
So we're going to skip ahead and pass it back to Carlene to hear statewide updates.
All right, so I just wanted to give a shout out to this team. This has already been reported, all of the people who showed up and how many meetings we had, but I think it's really tremendous that this group sent 17 people on Zoom calls to various meetings, 17 people by my count, but I'm only counting the 10th and the 31st Senate districts, and I know that you actually attract people from beyond that. So 17 people from those 2 Senate districts. So nice job, way to go, thank you, and a special shout out to Anne for all her help and also to Bob in all their help in planning this and getting it up and running. They were part of the planning team and also part of the team that made calls to legislators to schedule those appointments. So thank you both. And then the legislative update. Unfortunately, the day after our lobby day, there was the joint resolutions, Assembly Joint Resolution 80 and Senate Joint Resolution 63 that were passed unanimously by the Republican caucus. And the reason why that is so bad is because it sets government policy, and number 3 of those joint resolutions says retain as much as possible the core of existing districts, which means keeping as much as possible what we have now, thus maintaining communities of interest, not defined the way we have defined. The way I see this is a partisan community of interest versus a community of interest that has shared concerns and cultural or whatever other concerns. And then that staggered disenfranchisement due to staggered Senate terms has to do with whether you were in, if you were in 10 this year, you got to vote. If you were in 31 this year, you didn't get to vote. If the lines changed and you went from 31 to 10, you wouldn't get to vote next time either because the Senate elections are staggered. So that's that staggered term disenfranchisement. And it's just wrong. So there are a couple of statements by state legislators, our 2 heroes in the Assembly and Senate in their floor speeches against the joint resolutions here. And go ahead. We're still trying to get hearings on the 2 pieces of legislation that would create a nonpartisan process. So they've been languishing since June. The joint resolutions went through in 5 days. So we're continuing to call on this and say, I called you already. It's been since June. I know that these things can happen more quickly when it comes to redistricting. We just saw it happen with the joint resolution. So please don't stop calling on these 2 bills. And that's the information about how to do it. Those are all live links. So I so appreciate that folks are writing letters and have plans for that. And I am going to get with Jay and talk about the media liaisons and how he's doing that, because I think I want to see if I can construct something like that on a statewide level. So thank you for that inspiration.
Thank you, Carlene. It's always nice to see how all this fits into the statewide effort. So thank you for coming. What's coming up? Some of you may have seen this mapped out. It's a WPR podcast. Really, really well done. If any of your friends are into podcasts and they're not familiar with gerrymandering, this would be a great recommendation for them. I think it's 6 episodes, 20 minutes each or something like that. Very friendly, easy to understand approach. So highly recommend it. And I'd like to invite you on behalf of Debbie Patel to the North Shore Fair Maps group meeting on Monday. They're talking about race and redistricting. So they're looking at the the VRA,
Voting Rights Act.
Voting Rights Act, thanks.
Actually, this might be a good place for me to interject, because there was a question earlier about this, about the Voting Rights Act and the maps that the PMC created. So just really quickly, the maps that the PMC created, the way they are currently would reduce the number of majority minority Senate districts in the state legislature. These are not the final maps, and that's why it's really important that there's more input on them. And they have finally been able to secure a consultant who is an expert on the Voting Rights Act, and they'll be working with that person over the next week or two to not only make sure that these maps are compliant. They're not, it's not clear that they're out of compliance, but there's certainly quite a bit of concern about them. And so that will be rectified. And I think Maureen asked that question initially, or somebody. And so know that there is some truth to what's being said, but it's not that they're going to go through the way they are.
Thank you. Yeah, that Terry's question. Perfect. The next thing is that for everyone who created a community of interest map and submitted it to the People's Map Commission, we now have everything we need to transfer those maps from the People's Map Commission portal to the legislative portal. And the reason we want to do that is the legislators opened that portal, asked for maps from the people of Wisconsin. So we want to give them our community of interest maps. And if their maps that they create don't take that into account, then we can say, you know, we did provide you with this information. It feels like you asked for it in bad faith, maybe. So let's transfer as many of those maps as possible. So there are 3 ways for you to do this, and I'll put this all in the follow-up email, but a couple wonderful people from the Fair Maps Coalition put together a video that you can follow step by step. It is 15 steps or something, so it's not super straightforward, but the video is really easy to follow if you want to watch it and pause and do it and then watch it and then do their step. There's a super easy way for you to do this, which is just to give us permission. So the Fair Maps Coalition is organizing, transferring these maps, and we're stepping up and doing the ones for Western Wisconsin. So if you would like to have your map transferred from the People's Map Commission to the legislative portal without doing anything apart from filling out a very simple survey, you can scan this little QR code with your phone right now. And, you know, just open up your camera and look at this. It'll ask if it can open up your browser, and just go in there and fill it out. And then in the next few days, we will transfer that map for you. And I'll put this in the follow-up too. And if you're at a Mappy Hour, we can do it then as well. But seize the moment and do it now if you'd like. Your third option is National Redistricting Foundation is hosting a workshop on Friday. So that's tomorrow at noon, and you could go there and do it. But I highly encourage you, if you don't want to mess around, just fill out the survey. Let us do it for you. And if you helped anyone else do a community of interest map, I'll send you this information. And if you want to pass it along to them, that would be really awesome. The deadline for the legislative portal, it closes on October 15th. So we have about 8 days to make this happen. Cool. And then another thing I wanted to mention is that today at midnight, the People's Map Commission portal is closing for feedback on these maps. We can still provide feedback after tonight, but not specifically. They may not have time to take it into account. So if you'd like to look at the draft maps that they've created and provide some feedback, that would be really helpful to them, and also help us continue this narrative that, you know, the PMC is doing their process in an open, transparent way and listening to the people of Wisconsin. So it's kind of a dual bang for your feedback. They get the feedback, and we're emphasizing the value of their process. So anyone who would like to do that, it's super simple. I'll send you the link, but if you want to walk through it after we say goodbye, anybody who wants, you can just stay. It'll take 5-10 minutes. I can walk you through it and you'll feel like a pro. So super simple. And don't forget about the Mappy Hours. Join us in River Falls tomorrow or next week in Menominee or Amory. And any questions? I know that was a lot of actions. Any questions? No. All right. Our next meeting is November 4th And who knows, by then the legislators may have already put their maps out or about to. So a lot will happen in between. So let's take ourselves off of mute. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here and taking in all this information. It's like exercise for our brain just to keep up. So good job. And we'll just close our meeting today with onward. And then anybody who wants to stay to see what it looks like to provide feedback to the PMC on their draft maps, just hang out after for a minute. All right. So thank you, everyone. Wishing you a happy evening. And on the count of 3, we'll say onward. So 1, 2, 3. Onward. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye.
Thank you.
Night.
Yes.